Hello, students. Welcome to Pramati Hillview Academy digital class. Dear students, today I am going to take up a very beautiful poem, A Legend of the Northland by Phoebe Cary. Let's begin, children. Before we know about the ballad, A Legend of the Northland, let us know quick facts about Phoebe Cary. Phoebe Cary was born on 4th September 1824 in Mount Healthy, Ohio, in US. She was an American poetess and the younger sister of poetess Alice Cary. The sisters co-published poems in 1849. Such a talented poetess, Phoebe Cary, died on 31st July 1871 in Newport, Rhode Island, United States. Such a talented poetess, Cary published two volumes of poetry, Poems and Parodies in 1854 and Poems of Faith, Hope and Love. A Legend of the Northland is a ballad. A ballad is a poem narrating a story in short stanzas. Ballad is such kind of poem which tells a story in short stanzas, and in the poem all the stanzas comprise 4 lines. In total, there are 16 stanzas in this poem, and these stanzas will tell us a story. Ballads are a part of folk culture or popular culture and are passed on orally from one generation to the next. This story is of the Northland area, the area which is near to the North Pole. This exact place isn't specified, but Northland means the area in the northernmost part of the earth, that is near the North Pole. Legend means a historical story, one which is very old and has been passed on from generation to generation. Such a beautiful ballad, A Legend of the Northland is. Why to delay? Let's begin, children. This poem is taken from Beehive. Dear students, I am going to recite the poem once. Please look into your textbook. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. Where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows, and the children look like bear cubs in their funny, furry clothes. Then they tell them a curious story. I don't believe this true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. Once, when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it, preaching just as he did, he came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. Therefore she needed another and still a smaller one. But it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first had done. Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer, but she couldn't part with that. For she said, my cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away. So she put them on the shelf. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. And he said, you are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter, and fire to keep you warm. Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard dry wood. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same, but all the rest of her clothes were burnt black as a coal in the flame. And every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. Now let us try to understand the poem stanza wise. Let us look into the first stanza. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. Dear students, in this first paragraph, the poet gives an information. He says, in the region around the North Pole, the duration of the day is very less because its position is such that the sun's rays reach for a very less time. When this area is experiencing winter season, the duration of night is very long and the daytime hours are very less. In line 4, there refers to the people who live in this region. The poet says that the duration of the night time is so long that the people cannot sleep them through. If they go to bed, take a few hours of sleep, and when they wake up, they get to know it is still night time. He wants to emphasize on the fact that the duration of the night is very long. Second stanza, where they harness the swift reindeer to the sledges when it snows. Dear students, swift means something which runs very fast. Sledges means a vehicle on runners for conveying loads or passengers over snow or ice. And the children look like bears' cubs in their funny, furry clothes. The Northland region experiences severe cold conditions. It is a snowy area. The reindeer is an animal which is found in this polar region. People tie the reindeers to sledges and the reindeers pull the sledges. The poet adds that the children look like young ones of a bear because they wear funny looking clothes made of fur, which is like the furry skin of a bear. They tell them a curious story. I don't believe this is true, and yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. Dear students, curious means strange. Dear students, in the first line, they refers to the parents or elders, and them refers to the children or the younger generation. The elders of the Northland region tell a strange and interesting story to the younger generation. The poet says that he doesn't think that the story is true, but if he tells the story to the reader, maybe the reader could learn a lesson from it. The story gives an important message according to the poet. Once, when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below and walked about it, preaching just as he did, Dear student, here Saint Peter is an apostle of Christ, a disciple or follower of Jesus Christ. Preaching means to give a religious talk. The poet says that the poem is about Saint Peter. When Saint Peter used to live in the world and went around giving religious lectures to the people just like all saints do, then an incident happened. He came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. Dear students, hearth means fireplace where you do cooking. When Saint Peter was moving around the world giving religious lectures to the people, he reached the door of a cottage where a small woman was making cakes. She was baking the cakes in the fireplace. And being faint with fasting for the day was almost done, he asked her from her store of cakes to give him a single one. Faint means to be weak or famished. As Saint Peter had not eaten anything the entire day, he was very hungry and was feeling weak. So he went to this woman who was baking cakes and he asked for one cake out of many cakes that she had baked. So she made a very little cake, but as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. The woman was selfish. She did not give cake from her store. Instead, she started making a very small cake for Saint Peter. She did not want to share her things. But when she put the cake for baking, she looked at it and thought that this cake was too big to be given to someone. Therefore, she needed another and still a smaller one. But it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first had done. Students, needed means to make dough from flour. The little miser woman thought that the cake was too big to be given away. So she started making another smaller cake. When she looked at the cake, she again felt that it was as big as the previous one. Again, she wasn't ready to give this smaller cake to Saint Peter. Then she took a tiny small scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer, but she couldn't part with that. Scrap means small amount. The third time, she took a very small amount of dough and rolled it. The poet says that she rolled and rolled to lay emphasis on the fact that she rolled the dough and made it very thin like a wafer. And then she baked it. But she was so greedy that she couldn't give that thin piece of bread to the saint. For she said, "My cakes that seem too small when I eat of them myself are yet too large to give away." So she put them on the shelf. The woman reasons that when she eats the cakes, she feels that they are very small. But if she gives to someone, she feels that they are too big to be given away. She puts all the cakes on the shelf of her kitchen and she doesn't give any cake to Saint Peter. Then good Saint Peter grew angry, for he was hungry and faint, and surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. Dear students, provoke means cause to get angry. Saint Peter became angry. He was very hungry. He was feeling very weak, and the selfish woman was not ready to give him even a small cake. This behavior of the greedy woman angered the saint. And he said, "You are far too selfish to dwell in a human form, to have both food and shelter and fire to keep you warm." Dear students, dwell means to live. Saint Peter cursed the woman and said that she was very selfish. She did not deserve to live like a human being. He added that God had given her food, shelter, fire to keep warm, but she had become selfish for all the resources she had. She did not want to share them with anybody. "Now you shall build as the birds do, and shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood." Dear students, scanty means very little, boring means make a hole in something with a tool or by digging. Saint Peter cursed the woman that she would become a bird because she did not deserve the human form. She shall become a bird, and just like birds build their houses by boring into the wood and collect very little food by working hard the entire day. Similarly, she would also work hard in the dry wood all day and get little food and make a small place for herself to live in. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. As soon as Saint Peter cursed the woman, she did not get a chance to speak for herself, because that very moment she flew up to the roof through the chimney and flew out in the form of a bird. Saint Peter's curse had converted the woman into a bird. She had a scarlet cap on her head, and that was left the same, but all the rest of her clothes were burnt black as a coal in the flame. Dear students, scarlet means brilliant red color. When the woman turned into a bird, at that time she was wearing a red colored cap on her head. This cap was there on the bird's head also, but the woman's remaining clothes were burnt and turned black in color just like a coal. And every country schoolboy has seen her in the wood where she lives in the trees till this very day, boring and boring for food. Dear students, country means belonging to the countryside, that is, rural areas. People who live in the countryside, even the small children who go to school, have seen this kind of bird in the woods. They see that she stays there all day and keeps on digging the wood with her beak to collect her food. Whenever any child sees this kind of bird, then his elders tell him the story. They say that the bird used to be a woman earlier. She was very greedy, and so she was cursed by Saint Peter and turned into a bird. They get a teaching that they should not be greedy at all. Dear students, we have come to an end of the poem, A Legend of the Northland. This poem is based on the theme that greed is a grave sin. Greedy people don't deserve the blessings and the comforts of human life. The poem strongly advises that everyone should acquire the quality of kindness, fellow feeling, and empathy. The little woman's greed stopped her from sharing even her smallest cake with angry Saint Peter. So poem strongly advises that everyone should be kind on others. I hope you all have understood this poem really well and also enjoyed this poem really well. I'll come up with another video, another chapter. Until then, bye students, take care.